There's a story told that I've always loved, although it's possible that it's apocryphal, that it never really happened, but I really hope that it did. According to the story, Chaim Weizmann was meeting with some members in England of the House of Lords, and one of them asked him, "Why do you insist on Palestine when there are so many undeveloped countries you could settle in that would be so much more convenient?" Weizmann responded, "That would be like me asking you, why do you drive so far to visit your mother? There are so many old ladies who live just on your street." On Thursday we mark Yom HaAtzmaut. We celebrate Israel's Independence Day, marking 70 years, more than 70 years since the birth of the Jewish state. And the day before, on Wednesday, we mark Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day. We remember those who gave their lives for the Jewish homeland. It's a strange 48 hours. We celebrate our redemption, our return to the home of our ancestors, to a land overflowing with milk and honey, a land where we can live in peace, where we'll be safe from persecution and hatred. And we also recognize that that dream is only partially fulfilled, that we're celebrating the potential of what Israel could be someday, but is not fully realized. There is still war and there is still hate. There is still suffering. It's a striking contrast, the different emotions that one can experience in this 48-hour period, as we remember and mourn, and we celebrate and hope. It's a bittersweet moment. It reminds me of the story by S.Y. Agnon, Shmuel Yosef Agnon, the Fable of the Goat. You might already be familiar with it. But he tells the story of a father who is ill, and it was this milk from this goat that would heal him. It was the best milk. There was something magical, something special about it. And the goat would disappear sometimes for days at a time, but would always return full of this magical milk. One day the father asked his son to follow the goat, to see where the goat would go, where it disappears to for so long. So the boy follows the goat through fields, through meadows, over hills, across rivers, till finally the goat goes into the mouth of a small cave. The boy follows through. When they finally come out the other end of the passage, he's in a strange land, but a beautiful land. And he asks the locals, "Where are we?" And they reply, "We're in Eretz Yisrael." The goat had led him there through some magical shortcut. He writes a note to his father because he doesn't want to leave, telling his father where he is and placing it behind the goat's ear. So when the goat returns, his father will find it and follow the goat to join him in the promised land. The son's been gone now for days. The father's distraught, terrified that he sent his son to his death. And when the goat finally returns without the boy, the father is even more concerned. He can't stand to look at the goat. It just reminds him of what he had done. So he takes the goat to the butcher. It is only then, after it is too late, that the note falls out of the goat's ear and the father realizes what has happened. On the one hand, it's a tragedy. On the other hand, the boy has made it to the promised land. He's been redeemed. The Greeks may have invented tragedy, but as Jews, we've created this middle ground. We've turned tragedy into comedy. We found a space to celebrate and be joyful, and to also be sad. Our parsha this week relates two events that take place on the very same day. As Rabbi Grover mentioned earlier, this is the moment that all of their wanderings so far in the desert have been leading up to, the building of the tabernacle. It is finally completed. All of Jewish history, actually, up until this point, has been leading to this moment. The Mishkan, the first place of communal Jewish worship. It's completed. Moses and Aaron and the rest of the people dedicate it for its sacred purpose. The young Israelite nation is filled with joy. It's a moment of celebration, of triumph. But shortly afterwards, Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, bring what the Torah calls a strange fire, an Eish Zarah to the altar, and the two are almost immediately consumed by flame. Both of Aaron's sons die on the altar. The Torah gives little explanation as to why they are killed. Our tradition and the commentators actually give us over a dozen different reasons to explain what happened. But I don't want to focus on that part this morning. I want us to just imagine that day as a whole, the high and the low, a day of celebration and a day of mourning, of triumph and tragedy, a day of the most joy one can imagine, but ending with sadness, with achievement and with failure. What is the Jewish response to such a day? How do you hold on to both of those extremes at once? How does a person respond to experiencing such distinct emotions in close succession? It's a relevant question for all of us today. It seems to be the world we're living in. One minute there's good news, and the next there's bad. There's a new vaccine on the market, but it's in short supply. Numbers are going down, but there's a new variant. Patios are open, stay-at-home order. Even when we have occasions for joy, even when we have moments of simcha, our celebrations, there's added a sense of sadness. Because it's in those moments we recognize we cannot celebrate them as we wish we could. We can't celebrate them together. These are moments that are bittersweet, like the story. The emotions we feel are complex because our story is complex. Persecution and freedom, destruction and salvation. Almost every Jewish holiday is a mix of the both, some to more or less degrees. So what is the answer then? What is the answer when we are faced with such stark contrast? The answer is balance. We mourn and we celebrate. There's a story usually told in the summer months near Tisha B'Av, but I think it's appropriate today. Rabbi Akiva and a group of sages were walking through Jerusalem after the destruction, and they came across the remnants of the Holy Temple. And there in the ruins, they saw a fox walking through the Holy of Holies. The sages began to weep and cry, but Rabbi Akiva began to be merry. They were asking him, "Why are you merry? How can you be happy in this moment?" And he asked them, "Why are you sad?" The answer, they say, is obvious. The temple, the holiest, most sacred site of our people, is in ruins, and now it's a home to wild animals rather than a house of God. And Rabbi Akiva responds, "I'm merry because it's the beginning of redemption. Now that the prophecy of destruction has been fulfilled, the prophecy of redemption can take place." The sages are sad for the present reality, and Rabbi Akiva is merry for the potential of the future. We can have both responses. We can be sad for the moment and hopeful for what will come. Celebrate the promise. I remember when I was studying in Israel in 2011, there was a bombing outside the central bus station. And I remember afterwards in the yeshiva I was studying at, one of our teachers pulled all of us aside before class and had a serious talk with us. He felt as an Israeli and a bunch of North Americans living in Israel, it was his job to share some wisdom that I think was important, some practical advice. And at the time, I didn't realize that it was Torah. What he told us was that different reactions are okay. When you live in a place like Israel and these things occur, you'll see some respond with sadness, some respond with tears, some respond with fear. Others respond by making jokes. Others respond by refusing to let what happened stop them or change them in their life. They respond with defiance. This is the Jewish response, that it's okay to have multiple feelings about an incident. It's okay to experience multiple emotions. We can mourn like the sages. We can be joyful for the future, like Rabbi Akiva, or like Aaron in our Parsha, we can remain silent. Psychologists tell us that this is all healthy, that we shouldn't try to contain our emotions, refuse to let them out, and that it's okay. It's actually good to feel different emotions when things happen. It's okay to experience sadness and joy at once. It's okay to be both happy and devastated, to be hopeful for a future and yet mournful in the moment. There's another teaching that usually comes out around Tisha B'Av, that after the destruction of the Second Temple, people took on extra mourning customs. They would not eat meat or drink wine. And Rabbi Yehoshua asked them, "Why do you do this?" They respond, "Because meat and wine were offered in the temple. How can we drink them when we can no longer give them to God?" So Rabbi Yehoshua responded, "Bread too we should abstain from, because it also was offered in the temple as part of the sacrifice." They agree with him. They respond, they'll only live off of produce from now on. And Rabbi Yehoshua tells them, produce also, the first fruits were offered in the temple. Again, they agree. And they say they'll stay away from all the fruits that would have been offered, all of the produce that would have been given to God. Rabbi Yehoshua reminds them that water, too, was offered in the temple. And they respond, we cannot live without water. And the lesson Rabbi Yehoshua imparts with them is that to not mourn at all is impossible, but to mourn excessively, as they are doing, is also impossible. There is a limit to the mourning we can endure. There's a limit to the negative thoughts, the emotions, the pain, the sadness that a person can handle. And that's why in the face of tragedy, as Jews, we respond, not just with mourning, but with hope. This week we will celebrate and we will remember. We will mourn what has happened, and we will also hold out hope and joy for the future. It's been an incredibly difficult year. We've had ups and downs as individuals, in our families, as a community, as a city, and as a world. And the lesson our Parsha can teach us, the lesson our tradition can teach us, is that it's okay to feel different things. It's okay to be frightened. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to celebrate, and it's okay to be sad. My prayer this Shabbat is that one day soon, may we only have occasions of joy, of happiness. But until that day comes, may we embrace the wisdom of our tradition. And rather than trying to hold things in, be okay letting it out. Allow ourselves to feel what we feel and others to do the same. Shabbat Shalom.